All right, they might not have Joel Embiid and Paul George, but the Sixers do have a prime opportunity to pick up their first win of the season as they head up north of the border to take on the very injury-riddled Toronto Raptors. How you doing, Kyle?
Nothing better than when you're dealing with injury issues to go against a team that's worse on paper and has also hurt themselves. This should be hopefully a pick-me-up game for the boys fighting out of the Philadelphia corner.
It is, and we will get into all of that. This is, of course, a PHLY Sixers pregame show presented by Coors Light. Visit CoorsLight.com/PHLY basketball to get Coors Light delivered or to find a store near you. And you may have noticed that intro was maybe not as smooth as you are accustomed to. Devon is sort of like our Joel Embiid in many ways, both that he is absolutely critical to our show, but also, if you remember from last season, he does need to be load managed at this time of the year. So he is off tonight, and you will have to deal with Kyle and myself.
He does not like to work in October, man. Like, I don't know what it is about these first few months of the season, but Devon is, he subscribes to the belief that a lot of fans do, which is until Christmas, the NBA really doesn't count. So that's that's Devon. This is Kyle and Derek, and away we go.
Well, he has earned the night off, and we will make do without him. Luckily, we had some practice doing this last year. All right, so I guess we probably start off here with the injury report. Obviously, Joel Embiid and Paul George are both out. That is not surprising at all. Caleb Martin was probable coming into the game with a right calf contusion. He will play. Not only will he play, but we'll get into, might have a slightly different role than he did in the opener. We'll get into that in a little bit. The Toronto Raptors are a little bit of a mess. RJ Barrett, Bruce Brown, Kelly Olynyk, Emmanuel Quickley, Jacoby Walter, all out for various reasons. So they not only are they undermanned just because they're not a very good basketball team, but they also have most of their key players out as well. So like I said, Sixers might not have Joel Embiid. They might not have Paul George, but they have a very good opportunity. I believe the way you phrased this on Twitter earlier is this is as must-win of a must-win game can get in game 2 of the regular season.
Yeah, and somebody took that very seriously. And was like,
right. It doesn't mean that the season's over if they don't win. It means that you have serious questions if they don't pick up the win.
Yes. So I think, before we get too deep into the game, I think one noteworthy thing, and this came via Keith Pompey of the Inquirer, is that Paul and Joel are both on this trip with the team. And Derek, from covering this team for quite a while, Joel Embiid traveling with the team while he's injured and not playing is certainly not a guarantee. In fact, I would say this is more out of the norm than the norm. So I think that, to me, is a positive sign on multiple fronts. One, probably close to playing, but two, I think he and the team probably recognize that if they are going to be on this load management plan, he's going to miss back-to-backs, they're going to have him out throughout the year. That does not excuse him from, needing to be an active and engaged teammate and being part of this group that, quite frankly, they changed most of the team over the summer. So I personally am glad that whether this is driven by Joel or Nurse in the front office have been like, get your ass on the bench and come with the team instead of staying back home in Philadelphia. I think that's a positive for even if it's just like stupid vibe stuff. I think that's good. But more to the point about tonight, yeah, I mean, look, the Raptors are not expected to be good base level. It's a lot of young guys, developing team, have enough vets to be respectable this year. But when you're down RJ Barrett, Emmanuel Quickley, Bruce Brown, and Kelly Olynyk in the same game, I don't really see their path toward a win. So calling it a must win on Twitter is more just poking at the fact that this Raptors team is not equipped to beat anybody. They lost by 30 the other night in Cleveland. So I think given that Maxey and the rest of these guys are ready to go, I hope we get to see a lot of Jared McCain tonight. That would be my initial takeaway from looking at their starting lineup.
Well, after watching some of the players from last game, you might be wishing for a lot of Jared McCain in non-garbage time as well. But I'm picking up what you are putting down there. Yeah, no, I mean, this is a like you said, a Toronto team that lost by legitimately 30 to the Cavaliers. Cavaliers, of course, are a pretty good team, especially in terms of regular season. You might have some questions of their playoff chances, but they should win a lot of games. Even still, opening night getting shellacked by 30, and I believe that was at home, right? That was in Toronto.
I think so. Yeah.
This is a game that Tyrese Maxey should be able to cook, and that these Sixers should be able to claw out a win. It is, there's going to be a lot to watch, including obviously the starting lineup, which we will get to in a second. There are some pretty big changes to that, but I do think,
and thank God for that, Derek.
I'm not sure I necessarily agree with all of them, but I am happy that they have been made. It is a game certainly where more than anything, obviously you want to win, but you just want to see Tyrese Maxey look like Tyrese Maxey. I think this is a much better matchup for him to do so. Like we talked about earlier, and we both wrote about in our post-game columns, that was a little bit of a unique situation in the fact that the one way he was probably going to beat Milwaukee was if Brooks did not drop and he's going to punch him with the outside shot. The outside shot was off, and then he started pressing, and there was no spacing around him. He started driving straight into Brook, wasn't able to get the calls, yada, yada, yada. He had a real tough night. This is a matchup where I think he should be able to get pretty much whatever he wants. There's obviously always a chance that the shot is just off again. There's a lot of variability in that, but I think he will get much better quality looks, and I don't expect him to get nearly as frustrated. And I think if he has a strong game, like we've mentioned with the Raptors and their quality, I think they have a real good chance on this one.
Yeah, so we might as well get into some of the matchups we're expecting to see tonight, or some of the key matchups throughout this game. I think, right off the rip, Davion Mitchell getting the start in place of Quickly. Coming out of college, his calling card was he's a pest on defense, point of attack guy. And so, how Maxey handles what I would expect to be a decent amount of pressure defense from Mitchell, we'll see. I mean, certainly Mitchell has not been anywhere near as good as Sacramento was hoping when they drafted him. And let's be clear, Tyrese Maxey is levels clear of this guy. So even if Davion Mitchell has, a relatively respectable game by his standard, it is a guy that I expect him to beat up on. And Jakob Poeltl, I would assume anyway, will be in a similar type of coverage as we saw from Brook Lopez the other night, without being as formidable of a rim protector as he is. So if you're Tyrese Maxey, the hope would be you are able to kind of have your cake and eat it too, right? Where you will get opportunities to step into those pull-up jumpers. He has had success against Toronto in some recent seasons. Not exactly the best collection of talent they've had there last couple of years. So not saying a whole lot, but I think you should be able to get some of those early looks on pull-up jumpers. And then as you draw Poeltl out to the perimeter a little bit more, that should hopefully open up opportunities for him to get to the rim, whether that's the score or, the thing that I highlighted and that I was most disappointed in with Maxey the other night. I thought there were too many plays where he just needed like one more dribble, one more touch toward the paint. And, maybe you get under the rim for a reverse layup. Maybe you just find the corner shooter and somebody gets a high quality look out of your drives. And I was glad to hear what Maxey said after the game against Milwaukee, which was that, he thought he pressed a little bit. He's playing a little too fast, being that number one guy on opening night. And, some of those first few shots didn't go down, rushed. And so, I mean, the hope would be he can get some looks to go down early, and then that'll kind of snowball as we get deeper into the game.
Yeah, no, and I agree wholeheartedly. Like the perimeter shot should be there. He should be able to get what he wants coming off the screen. If that's not going there, I think he's going to have a much better chance to finish at the rim. And if that's not there, hopefully he, uses the floaters or the pull-up game, the middies that he was talking about afterwards to offset some of that. And he looks like he should have a little bit more shooting in the starting lineup alongside of him. I guess sort of getting into that because we didn't lay that completely out. Kyle Lowry, Maxey, Caleb Martin, Kelly Oubre Jr., and Andre Drummond are your starters for the Sixers. And then, like you said, Davion Mitchell, Grady Dick, Agbaji, Barnes, and Poeltl for the Raptors. That is it's not like they have world-class shooting around Tyrese Maxey, but you're not starting the, Drummond, Oubre, KJ Martin trio at the very least. Right. And especially because Eric Gordon, who was starting almost specifically because of his shooting, was not shooting all that well from the perimeter. So that is hopefully going to give him a little bit better of an environment to thrive in, both because the quality of the competition dropped 1 or 2 or maybe 7 levels down from where it was on opening night. and because he just should have a little bit better of a supporting cast. It will be great just one day to have the full starting five. That day is not yet, but like you said, hopefully the indications are Joel Embiid, because he is making, traveling on this trip, could be coming soon.
So what do you make of the Lowry shift into the starting lineup, which I don't think either of us are particularly surprised by, but it is very early for Nick Nurse to have already gone, you know what? We're not organized. Hit that Kyle Lowry button, baby.
Yeah. I don't love it. I'm not surprised. I might be a little bit disappointed. It's the classic father thing to say. No, I mean, look, they obviously have no clear-cut option there. Like Eric Gordon he's young compared to Kyle Lowry. He's not young. He's, on the downside of his career. And when his shot isn't falling, he doesn't offer all that much. He made one tough layup there on opening night. And outside of that, I think it was 1 for 6 from the field, didn't make a three, ended up with 2 points in I forget how many minutes. But when he is that ineffective, and like we've mentioned before, he was a pretty good shooter back in his day. Probably the thing that's dropped off the most over the years is on the perimeter. He just doesn't move his feet like he used to. So if he's not scoring, if he's not making shots, if the defense is able to load up a little more because there aren't any other options and real threats around him, it's tough to sort of make that work. So Nick went to the place that he trusts the most, and that unfortunately is a 38-year-old 6-foot point guard who has his limitations. And obviously the Sixers are without Embiid and Paul George. That makes the starting lineup a little more questionable. And obviously there's also we spent all summer talking about the KJ Martin trade exception. Nick came out and was talking up about how great of a summer and camp KJ had. They started billing him as sort of like more than a walking trade exception. He started on opening night, obviously with, injury asterisks applying, but there is that sort of trade chip that we're all sort of waiting on that you don't expect to happen probably literally until the week of the trade deadline, because Daryl doesn't like to be forced into making decisions until the last possible moment. So when you are injury riddled, like the Sixers currently are, there's probably just not going to be a great option. I would probably go back to Eric Gordon in place of Tyrese Maxey, or not Tyrese Maxey, Eric Gordon in place of Kyle Lowry.
Whoa, talk about controversy.
Gordon in place of Lowry, I would probably go there. And then I would keep Caleb Martin in there to complete the five. But I will also admit that Gordon didn't look great.
Yeah, so I think Lowry, if you're making the case for him, and look, to your point, not all ideal options, and maybe not any ideal options here. The case for Lowry is that you can get Maxey off ball a little bit more, and you don't have to have him every single time down. You're getting us into our sets. You have to set this up. And, basically the first like 8 minutes of that game on Wednesday night, Milwaukee was just like, get the ball out of his hands. We're going to trap him. We're going to force him to the sideline and show him.
Should have been no surprise to anybody watching this. That's what happened for 29 straight games there in February and March.
Yes. And so I think you saw the Sixers react to that in a couple of different ways. One was Lowry got to play more with Maxey toward the end of the first half and in the second half. Two, you saw someone like Caleb Martin bringing the ball up the floor. So it's not like, hey, you're giving Maxey 75 feet of pressure that he's got to work through on every single possession. So I think the main thing here is you're trying to get different looks for Tyrese and set up the offense in a different way. I think that's a good thing, right? Because when Paul George and Joel Embiid are actually playing, which who knows when that's going to happen, but when they're actually playing, not every play is going to be, hey, Tyrese, bring the ball up the floor and move the pieces around. Like, you want to tap into his ability to be a relocation, catch and shoot guy, moving off of other people. I think also we've seen, when he played next to, obviously, a bit more dynamic of a player, but like in a James Harden, to see Tyrese not just as that catch and shoot weapon on the wing, but as a closeout attacker, that's when I think his speed actually has been most valuable, right? Maybe not in a isolation situation, but when somebody is not set and is trying to meet him at the perimeter, and then he's just, quick first step and gone. So I think you get to see a little bit more of that playing in next to Lowry. And frankly, I still do trust Lowry's intelligence as a defender, if not his physicality and athleticism at this point. I share your concerns that they're already turning to Lowry in that media day. Nick Nurse's thing was, now Kyle's not going to have as big of a role this year. And it was one of those where we're like, yeah, let's just keep note of this for later because I'll believe it when I see it. And to get to game 2 of the regular season, admittedly, 2 stars are out. Things are a little weird. And they're already saying it's Kyle Lowry time. I would say I'm a little bit worried about him being the break glass in case of emergency guy for Nick Nurse at 38 years old.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that is a concern we will have pretty much right up until the deadline. Obviously, it becomes mitigated quite a bit when you have your full arsenal of stars. But there is probably one more role player, one pretty high level or at least decent role player. I'll go with high level that we expect them to pursue at the trade deadline. Kyle and I, in our predictions, both said that we would target a shooting guard and think that they could target a shooting guard. That falls directly into this second guard that we are debating right now between Eric Gordon and Kyle Lowry. When you're having an Eric Gordon versus Kyle Lowry debate in 2024, the year of our Lord, you do need some help there at that spot. So yeah, I definitely think a bigger guard who can play alongside Tyrese is something that is a need for this team. And because it's a need for this team, when Paul George is out, some of these conversations will be slightly annoying. And I agree with you that getting Maxey off ball, especially when he was struggling there in game 1 to try to get him going, maybe to try to free him up a little bit, it's a fine strategy. I just wish off ball meant something other than 38-year-old Kyle Lowry probably playing 25 to 30 minutes.
No, I hear you. Elsewhere in the lineup, I guess. So now that Caleb has assumed what we thought would be his place to lose in the starting lineup, this might be a weird question given that he started on opening night. Do you think KJ is still going to play and get those regular rotation minutes? Or as we saw in the second half, do you think maybe we see some more Ricky Council? Do you think maybe Yabusele plays, more forward minutes throughout the game? Like what's your read on that as we go into this one?
Yeah. Right now with Embiid out, I guess I still kind of expect Nurse to lean on KJ first. And if he doesn't have it going, then maybe go to Ricky as a spark. In the opener, I thought they really needed a spark. And I thought Ricky, quite frankly, provided it for them. But if you're asking me which direction will Nick turn to first, I still think he probably trusts KJ and his decision-making and his defense a little bit more. And I think that's probably where he's going to lean. It's just in the second half of the opener, like they were so desperate for any kind of offense and spacing and just any kind of an offensive spark that I think it made sense to try it. But I'm not convinced that they will, that's a permanent change.
I will say this. If KJ Martin plays, let's say 15 to 20 minutes tonight, and he doesn't shoot a 3 again, he should be stapled to the bench until he decides he wants to take jump shots, because that's just not an acceptable way of making a living as a role player in 2024. It's crazy. Like all the talk in the Bahamas and throughout the preseason.
Jumper looks great.
Not only did it look great, like he was like, I built it back up from a foundational level, right? Like he worked with his trainer on form in the paint, like was not allowing him to even really take jumpers. It's all the, the one arm form type stuff. And to get through the preseason, having taken 1 attempt from 3 and then 0 in the home opener, that's a little bit of confusing messaging, I would say. So I don't think he's long for the rotation if that doesn't change pretty quickly. Because Nurse was pretty transparent when he switched to Caleb at halftime the other night. It was like, I just thought we needed more offense. And it's not like Caleb Martin is like offensive dynamo, but he's someone who's at least willing to get shots up and do the things that you need out of that spot.
Yeah, look, I'm great. I'm happy that KJ went out in the offseason and put in the work. That's great. If it doesn't show up in a game, it would be like me being like, oh no, when we're off camera, I'm really funny. Well, it doesn't matter if I'm never funny and entertaining on the show. And to be clear, I'm not funny or entertaining on the show. That's why we have a 3-man group. But it is
a clown prince of PHLY is happy to chip in every once in a while.
He attempted one 3 3-pointer so far in a combined 144 minutes of preseason and regular season. Like, if he played the entire 48 minutes in a game, he would attempt 1 3-pointer every 3 games. It's great that he worked on it until it shows up in a game, and until he actually does it enough where he will be guarded out on the perimeter. It doesn't really matter how much work he put in. And I understand, like, maybe he did put in there. I'm not doubting that he did, but it has to actually materialize in game situations. Otherwise, defense. I mean, there's nobody sitting at home. Like, if you're the Raptors scouting this game, you're not going, oh man, they said in the preseason he worked hard, so we better get a guy out there and give Maxey an open driving lane. That's just not how the sport works. You have to actually take it.
I mean, listen, we saw a number 1 overall draft pick who allegedly was working on his jumper all summer many times, and we saw what the net outcome of that was. So I will not say that person's name on this show. I choose to move on and talk about some other things. I guess, like, if we're talking about keys to the game before we get up on out of here, is there anything that jumps out at you? Because to me, this is less about, I think this is a soft enough opponent with, baseline talent, but also the injuries, that to me, the most important thing tonight is just establishing some sense of normalcy. And not that these rotations matter a ton because it's still without the 2 main guys, but figuring out some of these lineup combinations that are going to become important as they get deeper into the season. I think that's probably where my mind is tonight, because I think getting the win should come pretty naturally. I think the rest of it is probably where my mind is heading in.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's tough, like we mentioned, it's tough to get a normalcy in rotations when you're missing not only Embiid, because we expect you're going to have to miss a decent chunk, but when we were missing both. And, hopefully this might be a little bit instructive of, there are 15 back-to-backs, 15 sets of back-to-backs. I've seen some confusion there. It's 30 total games. If you expect them to miss, Embiid to miss all 15, let's say Paul George misses 10, we've had some debates whether or not you would want to have them both miss the same games so you can maximize minutes they play together, try to build some chemistry. I think you split them, so hopefully you don't miss too much time with both of them out of the lineup. But yeah, finding out, which lineup combinations you can count on, which ones you think work well together. We're obviously trying a new one out here in Maxey and Lowry. We have a pretty good sample from last year to build off of, but Lowry hasn't gotten any better any younger in the 5 months here since the
probably
season
not any better either. Yeah,
probably not. But I didn't want to assume. You never really know. But it is along with the new group with Kelly in the starting lineup now with Caleb in the starting lineup. I'm real interested to see whether or not that was a 1-game experiment or whether you can expect Caleb to be in there at least until Paul George gets back in the lineup. Although, quite frankly, I would keep him in the starting lineup even when he does return. That's a different conversation. But yeah, building normalcy in the rotations. If you're looking for some key to actually winning the game, obviously Tyrese Maxey getting going, and then just winning the possession battle. This is a Toronto team that just doesn't have the firepower. And as long as you do not, barf all over yourself for 48 minutes, and usually when you barf all over yourself, that turns into turnovers or rebounding advantages. They should have a pretty easy time.
So one of the other things that I'm kind of interested in tonight is how do they use Yabusele, and in the minutes that he's going to play at the 5, presumably. I don't think Nick Nurse is all of a sudden going to be like, Adembona, come on down and play those backup minutes.
If he changes that as well, he's just throwing stuff at the wall at that point.
Yeah, but I think this is probably a decent opponent to get a read on. All right, like Milwaukee was uniquely tough, right? In that they have Brook Lopez, Giannis, but even like Bobby Portis on the bench, right? Where if you have an undersized 5, they're going to be able to punish you as, in the driving kick game, but also on the offensive glass at times. I think this is probably between Pirtle and Chris. I never know whether to say Boucher or Boucher because I hear people
say Boucher.
Okay. I say Boucher because of Brian Boucher, and I assume because he's Canadian that's the right way to do it. But I think tonight will be a decent or reasonable test of like, okay, will this work on the average night, or at least a lot of the average nights that Joel Embiid won't be available for? Because I would assume that Joel's going to play in, back-to-backs, and if he's playing the first half or the back half, they're going to try to play him against the better teams with the more established front courts and what have you. And Yabusele will get more tests as a 5 against a team like this, where Pirtle is good, but you're not going to spend a bulk of your time matched up with him. And we'll see if he holds up against the other, the rangy athletes like Boucher. So I'm interested in that, but I also want to keep seeing him in that 4 spot. Is the 3-point shot there? And how his role is going to evolve here over the next few months.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like Yabusele is probably someone we can bring up legitimately almost every game, in part because he's new, in part because, especially with the way he can get after it defensively and mix it up and force turnovers and, just really pursue loose balls in a way that most forwards on his team have never really pursued loose balls. He's going to be someone that we're going to be watching every game, not only because he is new, but also because, they could really use that skill set. So it's watching that skill set, seeing how it translates, and seeing whether or not he's going to make enough shots to, to be able to stay on the floor. So yeah, he will be a key pretty much every time out there. All right, let's get to our best bets segment for Sixers versus Raptors. This
without Gambling Givens over there?
Without Gambling Givens. Don't worry, we have Gambling Bree here to help us out here. This pregame pick segment is brought to you by Bet365. Use code PHLY365. When you sign up, whatever the moment, it's never ordinary at Bet365. Must be 21 plus and physically located in Pennsylvania. If you or someone you know has a gambling problem and wants help, call or text 1-800-GAMBLER. All right, so let's pull up Bree's picks here.
Perfect. All right. We have a same game parlay of Andre Drummond, 10 plus rebounds. That feels safe. Grady Dick, 15 plus. A lot of opportunities there. And Sixers money line for a plus 210. I would say of these ones that super producer Bree picked, the first basket one I really like a lot because, Maxey came out gunning and firing the other night. We're expecting a big night out of him tonight. I think that makes a whole lot of sense on paper. And what was that final one, Bree? Threes made over 1.5 for Kelly Oubre at minus 190. How do we feel about our good friend Kelly Oubre bouncing back tonight, Derek?
Well, look, the great thing about Kelly is he will get him up.
Oh, yeah.
So it's not so much about the efficiency. Like if this was Kelly Oubre 40% from 3, I would be a little bit skeptical. But if it's over under on makes, I think there is a decent chance. I think maybe the one that you would look at is the Grady Dick 15 plus. But he's going to have a chance to go up against Maxey and Lowry at various points. They can try to get the switch to get him on whatever matchup they like. So there is a chance that he will be able to put up points against this struggling defensively backcourt the Sixers have. But yeah, I think those are all pretty good. The Drummond 10 plus feels like an absolute.
Oh, that's free money. I think if you bet that on its own, it's probably like the odds would be a joke. So I'm not surprised that Bree decided like, hey, let's throw this into a same game parlay. Does not surprise me whatsoever.
Yep, I agree with that. So yeah, I think those are all pretty sound picks. I really do. And Maxey with the first basket, I think is a fun little way to go because, like you said, I think he's going to come out and look to try to establish himself early after after struggling in the opener.
Yeah, and Grady Dick, by the way, in the opener had 16 points. So 15 plus feels certainly achievable tonight, where the Raptors have a lot of guys out. So not just somebody, multiple guys are going to have to scale up and get some more shots up. So that feels like a pretty good bet as well.
I agree. All right. I think we have one more super chat here to get to, and then we will wrap it up. From Corey, he likes Ayo Dosunmu on the Bulls in a trade. He thinks he has real Derek White-esque potential.
I do like Ayo. I don't know about Derek White because I think Derek White as a shooter turning into a very good shooter at age like 28 is one of the most inexplicable things that's happened in recent NBA history. But Ayo as a competitor, defensive, like two-way player, someone who can create just enough for themselves and is, just a classic pain in the ass type guy as a off the bench player. Like him a decent amount. I'm not sure how attached to him Chicago is, but it's an interesting name we'll have to keep an eye on as we get closer to the deadline.
Yeah. And I feel like every role player two-way guard is going that you like is going to be compared to Derek White a little bit.
Yeah.
It's a edge case outlook for sure. And like you said, him turning into the shooter that he is just, it's rare. And he's one of the best perimeter defenders in the game. I like Io, but it's a high bar to try to clear. Not everyone who has that kind of, if there are 100 people who have Derek White's potential, maybe 3 or 4 of them will actually reach the level that Derek White did. So Io could end up being really good and develop well and still not quite reach that. But I certainly agree he has pretty good two-way potential, especially if that shot, really translates to any kind of a degree that Derek White's did. And he shot the ball well last year, but he was a little up and down before that. But yeah, I certainly think if the Bulls are looking to make a trade, and like we've mentioned time and time again, predicting the Bulls is often an effort in futility. But if they are, he would certainly be a target. And he's on a pretty reasonable deal from what I remember.
If we're throwing darts at a board, we might as well throw a dart at
pretty good
that
dart.
one.
Yep. All right. I think that is just about all that we have time for as the game is getting ready to tip. And since it's not an ESPN game, we don't have quite the buffer that we would have on opening night. So thank you, Kyle, for jumping on. We will be back here after the game, somewhere in the 9:30-ish range, East Coast. And we will talk to you soon.
See everybody.
We all silly like the mayor.